Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
The Case of the Crimson Manuscript. Chapter 1, The Visit from the Publisher. The afternoon had been uneventful by our usual standards. Nero Wolfe was in the plant rooms, tending to his orchids with the devotion most men reserve for religion or politics. I was at my desk, trying to balance the month's expenses while ignoring the creeping suspicion that my boss was about to demand another batch of imported truffles. When the doorbell rang, it had the kind of urgency that suggested either trouble or money. I opened it to find a man in his mid-50s standing stiffly on the stoop. His hair was iron gray, his glasses perched low on a narrow nose, and his expression was the kind of cultivated politeness you see on people who've spent their lives talking about deadlines. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. "That's right. And you are?" "Clifford Ames, publisher. I'd like to speak with Mr. Wolfe. It's a matter of literary importance." Now, that was a new one. We'd had visitors with problems ranging from stolen jewels to missing husbands, but literary importance was a first. I waved him in. "Step inside. You'll have to give me a minute to pry Wolfe from his orchids. He gets testy when pulled away before feeding time." Mr. Ames didn't smile. He looked around the office with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval, his eyes lingering on the empty beer bottle on my desk as if it personally offended the English language. A few minutes later, Wolfe appeared, large, deliberate, and mildly annoyed. He settled into his chair with the grace of a man returning to his throne. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ames. Archie tells me you're here about something literary. That's a dangerous word in this house." Ames cleared his throat. "I publish the New York Review Quarterly. One of our authors, a historian named Dr. Leonard Brody, recently died under what the police call accidental circumstances. He fell from his study window last week." "I read about that," I said. "A tragic fall. Supposedly reached for a book and lost his balance." Ames adjusted his glasses. "That's the official story. But I received a letter from Dr. Brody 2 days before his death. He claimed to have discovered something extraordinary, something that could change the course of literary history. He said he feared for his life." That got Wolfe's attention. His eyes opened fully, and his fingers stopped drumming. "You brought this letter?" Ames nodded and produced an envelope from his inner pocket. Wolfe gestured for me to take it. I slid it open and read aloud. "Dear Clifford, I have made a discovery that will shake the very roots of English literature. My research into the Milton archives has led me to evidence suggesting Paradise Lost was not written by Milton at all, but by a woman named Eleanor Fane. I have secured proof, original drafts in her hand. I will reveal everything soon, but I fear someone means to silence me before I do. Signed," I said, "Dr. Leonard Brody." Wolfe leaned back, his eyes half closed. Preposterous on its face. But perhaps that is why he was killed. Ames shifted in his seat. "I don't care who wrote Paradise Lost, Mr. Wolfe. What concerns me is that the original manuscript, the so-called proof, has vanished. The police found no trace of it in his study. But Brody's assistant swears she saw it in his possession the day before he died." "Ah," Wolfe murmured. "So you want me to find it?" "Yes. And if necessary, the truth behind his death. My reputation, and perhaps my company's future, may depend on it. I could tell Wolfe was tempted. He had little interest in publishing scandals, but anything involving missing manuscripts and intellectual vanity stirred his curiosity. He finally said, "You will leave the letter with me, Mr. Ames. Archie will obtain the police report and details about Dr. Brodie's last day. The fee will be satisfactory, provided the work interests me beyond its pecuniary value." Ames nodded. "You'll have whatever you require. But I must warn you, Dr. Brodie's circle is difficult. Scholars, critics, jealous peers. They will not welcome an inquiry." "Few do," Wolfe replied. After he left, I said, "Well, boss, that's a new flavor. A murder over poetry." Wolfe gave a small grunt. "There are men who will kill for less. A disputed comma has ruined friendships. But a disputed authorship, that could destroy reputations, legacies, fortunes. I have known vanity to kill more surely than poison." I opened my notebook. "So, where do we start?" "Brodie's assistant," Wolfe said. "Get her name and arrange a visit. A secretary always knows more than she should. And fetch me a list of Brodie's known associates. I suspect one of them coveted that discovery, or feared it." By evening, I'd gathered what I could. Dr. Brodie had lived alone in a brownstone on East 74th. His assistant was a young researcher named Miss Evelyn Hart, a recent graduate from Columbia. According to the police, she was the one who found the body. Brodie's death had been ruled accidental, no forced entry, no signs of struggle. When I called Miss Hart, her voice trembled. "I already told the police everything. Dr. Brodie was working late, as usual. I went home around 9. When I returned in the morning, the study window was open and," she paused, "he was on the pavement below." "Did you see the manuscript he mentioned in his letter?" I asked. "Yes. A leather folio, old and fragile. He said it contained drafts in an unknown woman's hand, early versions of Milton's lines. I thought it was a joke. Do you think anyone else knew about it?" Well, Dr. Brodie had an argument the day before he died. With Professor Roland Hume from Cambridge. Something about plagiarism. That name rang a faint bell. Hume was a literary bulldog who'd spent years defending Milton's reputation against revisionist historians. If Brodie had challenged him, sparks would have flown. I hung up and filled Wolfe in. "Hume," Wolfe repeated. "A man whose vanity matches his intellect. Archie, you will visit him tomorrow. Meanwhile, I shall consider what kind of fool risks death over a few ancient pages." I smirked. "That's easy, boss, the human kind." He grunted again, the sound he makes when he doesn't want to admit I'm right. As the house settled into silence, I caught Wolfe gazing at the letter again. He didn't say it, but I knew that look. He wasn't thinking about Milton or manuscripts anymore. He was thinking about murder. And once Nero Wolfe starts thinking about murder, somebody, somewhere, is about to get exposed. Chapter 2, The Scholar from Cambridge. The next morning broke gray and cool, a welcome change from the sticky air that made New York feel like it was trying to imitate a greenhouse. Wolfe, of course, was upstairs indulging in breakfast that could have fed a platoon, eggs, sausages, honeyed bread, and a pot of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I had mine quick and simple because I was expected to meet the famous Professor Roland Hume, defender of Milton and, possibly, murderer. I took a cab to the Belmont Hotel, where the professor was staying before returning to England. The clerk pointed me to the tea lounge, and there he was, tall, sharp-nosed, and polished, like an expensive antique sword that hadn't seen combat in years. He sat surrounded by newspapers, stirring his tea with the patience of a man who'd never rushed for anything in his life. "Professor Hume?" I asked, stepping up. He looked me over with a practiced coolness. "Yes. And you are?" "Archie Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe." That got a reaction, not much, but enough. He blinked once, and a faint line of disapproval crossed his forehead. I know of Mr. Wolfe. A man of formidable appetites. And an unfortunate interest in scandal. You might call it truth, if you're in a generous mood, I said, pulling out a chair without asking. We're looking into the death of Dr. Leonard Brodie. He didn't move for a moment, just kept stirring his tea. A tragedy. The man was eccentric but not unpleasant. His death has caused unnecessary speculation. Like the letter he wrote his publisher claiming he'd found something to shake up Milton's reputation? That did it. The spoon clinked hard against the cup. Utter nonsense. Brodie was delusional. He'd spent his career chasing phantoms, seeing conspiracies in every dusty archive. He once told me Shakespeare's sonnets were written by a Jesuit. Still, you argued with him the day before he died, I said. That's in the police report. He sighed. Yes. I confronted him about a paper he was preparing, full of fabrications. I told him publishing such a lie would ruin him and disgrace the discipline. He refused to listen. The man was drunk on the fantasy of discovery. Was the manuscript real? I asked. His eyes narrowed. He claimed it was. I never saw it. And if it existed, I imagine someone burned it by now. Convenient, I said. He leaned back. You Americans have an unfortunate tendency to think every death is a plot. Brodie's was an accident. I don't care to be accused of murder simply because I despised his scholarship. He stood to leave, but I wasn't finished. One last thing, Professor. If this manuscript proved that Paradise Lost was written by someone else, say, a woman, what would that do to your reputation as Milton's greatest defender? His lips thinned. It would render my life's work meaningless. But fortunately for me, and for Milton, it's a fantasy. Good day, Mr. Goodwin. He walked away with the calm of a man who'd rehearsed his indignation. But there had been something in his tone, a crack in that British marble, when I mentioned the manuscript. He was afraid of it, all right. By the time I got back to West 35th Street, Wolfe was knee-deep in one of his food rituals. The smell of lamb stew filled the air, which meant I had about 10 minutes before he retreated to his orchids again. I laid out what I'd learned. Hume, he said thoughtfully, possesses the motive of vanity and the temperament of a man who would kill for reputation. But intellect alone doesn't make a murderer. What of Miss Hart? She's shaken but sharp, I said. Swears she saw the manuscript. Said it was a leather folio filled with drafts that looked centuries old. Brodie kept it locked in his study. Wolfe nodded slowly. And no trace of it after his death. Right. The police didn't find the key to his desk either. He grunted. Archie, I want the list of everyone who had access to that study, cleaning staff, colleagues, even the publisher. And have Miss Hart come here tomorrow morning. I wish to question her myself. Got it. Anything else? Yes. Fetch me the article Brodie last submitted to the New York Review Quarterly. Ames may still have a draft. If Brodie's death is tied to his discovery, something in that paper will hint at the threat it posed. I made the call. Ames said he'd send a copy by courier within the hour. Meanwhile, Wolfe settled back with his beer and a book of 17th-century poetry, a combination I never understood. When the envelope arrived, I slit it open and handed him the manuscript. The title page read, Eleanor Fane and the True Voice of Milton. I watched Wolfe's lips move as he read silently, his brow furrowing deeper every page. After a while, he looked up. Archie, he said, Dr. Brodie was either a visionary or a fool. He cites letters, annotations, and marginalia supposedly written in a woman's hand, documents that would upend the accepted canon. If such evidence exists, its destruction would serve every scholar whose livelihood depends on Milton's purity. So basically, a lot of suspects, I said. Yes. Which simplifies nothing. However, Wolfe paused, his gaze distant. Brodie could not have fabricated this entirely. He refers to a private archive, the Fane collection, housed in a small estate near New Haven. We will start there. We, I said, meaning me. Of course, Wolfe replied smoothly. I abhor travel. The very thought of Connecticut offends me. You will go there tomorrow, Archie. Make discreet inquiries. Determine if any documents recently left the collection. Take care not to awaken suspicion. I sighed. You know, you could see the world one day, boss. I see the world daily, he said, patting his stomach. On my plate. That was that. He dismissed me with a flick of his hand and turned back to his orchids. Before heading out, I poured myself a drink and went over my notes. We had a dead historian, a missing manuscript, a jealous scholar, and a publisher desperate to avoid scandal. Typical Wolfe territory, which meant before this was over, someone was going to panic, and when they did, I'd be there to catch it. As I turned off the lights and locked the door behind me, I thought of Professor Hume again, his tight smile, his cold denial. Maybe he hadn't pushed Brodie, but he was hiding something. And tomorrow, once I got to New Haven, I planned to find out what that something was. Because if there was one thing Nero Wolfe taught me, it's that manuscripts don't vanish, they're hidden. And the person who hides them usually has blood on their hands. Chapter 3, The Fane Collection Mystery. Connecticut greeted me with gray clouds and the kind of chill that crept up your sleeves. Wolfe had insisted I take the morning train, something about minimizing unnecessary variables, which was his polite way of saying he didn't trust me to drive without stopping for lunch. By the time I reached New Haven, I'd already reviewed Brodie's notes twice. Each reference pointed toward the Fane collection, a family archive said to house rare literary papers dating back to the 1600s. The Fane estate sat on a hill overlooking the harbor, surrounded by acres of stubborn autumn trees. The mansion itself was a monument to fading wealth, tall windows, peeling paint, and the quiet gloom that comes from too much history and not enough upkeep. I rang the bell, and a moment later a woman in her 40s opened the door. Her hair was pinned neatly, her posture crisp, but her eyes told me she hadn't slept much. Miss Fane? I asked. Yes. Eleanor Fane, descendant of the original family, she said, her voice carrying both pride and exhaustion. You must be the gentleman from New York. Mr. Ames telephoned ahead. I stepped inside, taking in the smell of parchment and polish. The hallway walls were lined with portraits, men and women with severe faces and ink-stained fingers. I appreciate you seeing me, I said. I'm assisting Nero Wolfe. We're investigating the death of Dr. Leonard Brodie and the disappearance of a manuscript he claimed to have found here. At the mention of Brodie, her expression darkened. He visited us 3 months ago. A courteous man, but far too curious. He insisted on viewing private papers my family rarely allows anyone to see. He said it was essential to his research on Milton. And did you let him? She hesitated. Eventually, yes. My father passed last year, and the archives were my responsibility. I escorted Dr. Brodie to the library and allowed him 2 days of study. When he left, he thanked me profusely and promised I'd hear something extraordinary soon. Then, well, you know what happened. I nodded. Did he remove anything? Her eyes flicked toward the far end of the hall, where a heavy wooden door stood ajar. No, she said slowly. He signed our ledger when he arrived and when he departed. We checked his bags as a formality. Nothing appeared missing. But something was missing later? Yes. A week after his visit, I noticed one of the small folios had been moved. It contained early drafts of a devotional poem by Eleanor Fane, our ancestor. She was a poet, though history has forgotten her. Brodie seemed fascinated by her handwriting. I followed her into the library. The place was magnificent, high ceilings, ladders on rails, and shelves full of manuscripts that looked like they'd crumble under too much light. On a long oak table lay several parchment folios wrapped in linen. Miss Fane pointed to an empty space among them. That is where the missing folio belonged. Was it catalogued? Yes. EF/PL/3. Eleanor Fane's annotations on Paradise Lost, copied by her hand around 1667. The text contained alternate phrasings, entire lines missing from Milton's printed version. Sounds like the same evidence Brodie mentioned. She gave a sad smile. If true, it would rewrite literary history. But if false, it would ruin a great many people. Dr. Brodie's claim made enemies before it was even published. I took a closer look at the desk. There was a faint outline of dust where something rectangular had once rested, about the size of a thin book. Was the lock on this case forced? No. Only I and our caretaker, Mr. Hale, have keys. Where's Hale now? She hesitated. He left 3 days ago. Family emergency, he said. I've been unable to reach him since. I made a note. And no one else has access. Not to my knowledge. She offered me tea, which I declined, then led me outside to the terrace. From there, the view of the harbor stretched gray and endless. Do you think Dr. Brodie was killed over this? She asked quietly. I think someone wanted to stop his discovery from going public, I said. If this manuscript proved your ancestor wrote parts of Paradise Lost, every Milton scholar in the world would have a motive to bury it, or steal it. Her hands tightened around the railing. Then I fear what might happen if it surfaces again. When I left the estate, the sky had turned to slate and rain threatened. I walked down the gravel drive to my rental car, turning over what she'd said. Hale's sudden disappearance was convenient, too convenient. If Brodie had seen something in that folio worth dying for, Hale might have realized its value too. I stopped at a diner in town to call Wolfe. He answered on the third ring, his voice sounding like I'd interrupted a steak dinner. Well, he asked. The folio's gone, boss. Miss Fane confirmed Brodie studied it weeks before his death. The caretaker vanished soon after. Smells like theft wrapped in murder. Wolfe made a low rumble. Describe the contents. Annotations by Eleanor Fane. Alternate lines, corrections, stylistic choices, all resembling Milton's verse but in her hand. If genuine, it means she could have been his collaborator or ghostwriter. Humph, Wolfe said. Such revelations inspire passion among scholars. Passion, in turn, breeds violence. Have you examined Miss Fane's demeanor? She's sincere, maybe scared. But she's hiding something, that much I'd bet on. Good. People conceal more than they confess. Return to New York tonight. We'll have Miss Hart here in the morning. And Archie. Yeah. Bring me a sample of that dust pattern you observed. Take a soft cloth and seal it. There may be trace residue, and I wish to test a theory. That was Wolfe for you, solving riddles with one hand while buttering toast with the other. I followed his instructions, collected a sample, and hit the road. The rain caught up halfway to the city, slapping the windshield like a warning. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else had been on that hill, someone who'd watched Brodie's footsteps and followed them straight to the Fane library. By the time I reached Manhattan, night had swallowed the skyline. I parked, climbed the brownstone steps, and found Wolfe in his chair, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together. Without opening them, he said, "You found more than you realize, Archie." "Oh? The dust," he murmured. "It will tell us who last handled that folio. And when I match that with what Miss Hart reveals tomorrow, we shall see whether Brodie fell, or was pushed." I hung up my coat, grabbed a beer, and dropped into my chair. "Boss, you make murder sound like chess." It is, he said, opening his eyes at last. And the next move belongs to us. Chapter 4, The Assistant's Confession. Morning sunlight slipped through the brownstone blinds in weak stripes, catching the edge of Wolfe's breakfast tray, eggs, mushrooms, and something he called a modest portion of kidneys, which looked anything but modest. I had my usual coffee and toast and waited while he enjoyed his first hour of silence, the one sacred stretch of time between breakfast and the world's noise. At 10 sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Miss Evelyn Hart, Brodie's assistant. She looked even younger than I remembered from the phone call, mid-20s maybe, neat gray coat, gloved hands trembling slightly. There was intelligence in her eyes, though, and the kind of guilt that can't be hidden under politeness. "Miss Hart," I said, "come in. Mr. Wolfe is expecting you." Wolfe greeted her from his chair with a small nod. "Sit down, please. Archie will take notes. You needn't fear this conversation, unless, of course, you are concealing something." That earned me a glance that said he's joking, right? I didn't answer because Wolfe rarely joked. "Mr. Wolfe," she began, voice steady but low, "I already told the police everything I know. Dr. Brodie's death was tragic, but—" "Tragic, yes," Wolfe interrupted, "but convenient for someone. And you, Miss Hart, are in a unique position. You saw the manuscript. You worked closely with the man. You probably know what frightened him before he died." Her hands tightened in her lap. He was frightened, yes. The last week of his life, he barely slept. He said people were watching him. I thought it was paranoia from overwork. "Did he mention any names?" Wolfe asked. "One, Professor Roland Hume. He said Hume accused him of forgery in a letter. Dr. Brodie laughed it off at first, but then his study was broken into. Nothing was taken, at least not that we saw, but his notes were disturbed." I leaned forward. "You didn't tell the police about that?" "They wouldn't have believed me. There were no signs of forced entry, and Dr. Brodie asked me not to make a fuss. He said he'd handle it." Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me. "Archie, mark that." The intruder was careful. Someone with knowledge of locks, or a key. I nodded, jotting it down. "Miss Hart, what did Brodie plan to do with the manuscript?" "He wanted to publish a paper in the next issue of the New York Review Quarterly. But before that, he intended to photograph the pages and send copies to several colleagues for verification." She hesitated, then added softly, "He never got the chance. Because the manuscript disappeared," Wolfe said. "Did you see it the night he died?" "Yes. He showed it to me. It was in a leather folio, bound with red thread. He was excited, said it was proof that Eleanor Fane wrote passages later attributed to Milton. He warned me not to tell anyone, not even Mr. Ames, until he finished his authentication notes." "What happened next?" I asked. "I left around 9. He stayed up to work. The next morning, I found the police outside. The window was open, and the manuscript was gone." Wolfe's voice softened slightly, the way it does when he senses truth. "You believe he was murdered?" She nodded, eyes filling. "Yes. But I don't know who did it. The police think he fell, but I know Dr. Brodie, he wasn't clumsy, and that window was always locked. Someone was there that night." "Do you have any reason to think it was Hume?" Her hesitation was brief but telling. "Maybe. The day before Dr. Brodie died, a messenger delivered a package from England, no return address. Inside were burned fragments of paper and a note that said, 'Stop your heresy.' Dr. Brodie destroyed it immediately." "Where's the package now?" Wolfe asked. "I threw it away the next morning. It was just ashes." Wolfe sighed. "Ashes are rarely meaningless. Miss Hart, did Dr. Brodie ever mention the Fane estate directly?" "Yes. He said the folio came from there. He was thrilled by what he found, drafts that matched Milton's language but in a woman's hand. He even mentioned the ink composition matched samples from Eleanor Fane's letters. Ah! Wolfe leaned back, folding his hands. So he had corroboration, enough to convince someone that exposure would destroy reputations. She looked confused. You think someone in academia killed him? I think, Wolfe said slowly, that ambition makes scholars as dangerous as soldiers. Brodie's discovery would have ruined Hume and perhaps embarrassed others who'd built careers on the old narrative. But there's something else. Miss Hart, you said his notes were disturbed during the break-in. Did you later find anything missing? Her eyes flicked downward. Not at first. But 2 days before he died, he told me the key to his desk had vanished. Wolfe's tone sharpened. And did he have a spare? No. I looked at Wolfe. So whoever had that key could have entered after she left and taken the folio. Precisely, Wolfe said. Miss Hart, think carefully. Did Dr. Brodie ever hint at trusting anyone else with his research, another scholar, perhaps, or someone he owed a favor? She thought for a long moment. Only one. A man named Hale, a caretaker at the Fane estate. He helped him handle the manuscripts while he was there. Dr. Brodie said Hale understood their value more than the family did. That name again. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Mr. Hale appears frequently in this tale, and always near something missing. Archie met Miss Fane yesterday and learned that Hale has conveniently disappeared. It seems our caretaker is the thread that ties death to theft. Miss Hart looked startled. Then he took the manuscript. Perhaps, Wolfe said. But theft alone does not push a man from a window. Someone silenced Dr. Brodie to ensure that folio never reappeared, or that when it did, it would be under their name. He stood, a rare event. Miss Hart, you will remain in town and avoid speaking with the press. Archie will escort you home. Someone may already suspect you've spoken to me. Her eyes widened. Do you think I'm in danger? I think, Wolfe said, that knowledge is a perilous inheritance. Dr. Brodie's death solved someone's problem, but your memory of events may create new ones for them. Take care. She thanked him quietly and rose. When she left, Wolfe lowered himself back into the chair with a sigh that suggested both irritation and satisfaction. Well, I said, we've got a missing manuscript, a runaway caretaker, and a professor with enough pride to kill for punctuation. You think Hale's our man? Not yet, Wolfe said. A thief, perhaps. But murder requires more than greed, it demands pressure, fear, and opportunity. The key to Brodie's desk will lead us to the killer. Meaning? Meaning, Wolfe said, pouring himself a glass of beer, that whoever possessed that key was in the study the night Brodie died. Find out who duplicated it, and you will find who pushed him. He raised his glass slightly, as if to toast his own logic. Archie, he added, have Saul Panzer trace this Hale fellow. He may be hiding with more than stolen parchment. I nodded. And if I find him? Wolfe smiled faintly. Then bring him back alive. The dead, I find, are inconvenient conversationalists. Chapter 5, The Man Who Vanished. New York was caught between drizzle and fog that morning, the kind of weather that made everything feel half erased. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when Saul Panzer called. If you don't know Saul, picture a man who could find a snowflake in a blizzard and then tell you which cloud it came from. I've got your caretaker, he said. That was fast, I replied. Luck and a little digging. Name's Daniel Hale. 47, unmarried, worked part-time as a custodian and archivist at the Fane estate. No criminal record, but a recent withdrawal from a savings account, $5,000 in cash. Last seen boarding a bus to Philadelphia 3 days ago. Philadelphia? Yeah. And I've got an address, a cheap boarding house near Chestnut Street. Room 13. That was all I needed. I called Wolfe. "Boss, Panzer found Hale in Philly. You want me to bring him in or chat first?" "Chat," Wolfe said, his voice thick with breakfast. "But with restraint. If he possesses the manuscript, I prefer it intact." "Understood. I'll keep my fists holstered." "Good," Wolfe replied. "Your restraint is as rare as truth in politics. Try not to break the streak." By mid-afternoon I was in Philadelphia. The boarding house was an old brick building that smelled of mothballs and bad coffee. The landlady pointed me to Hale's room, and I found the door locked. I knocked. After a pause, it opened a few inches. A man's face appeared, thin, pale, unshaven. "Yes," he said warily. "Daniel Hale?" "Who's asking?" "Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." That name did it. The door swung open another inch. "What do you want?" "Just a talk. About Dr. Leonard Brodie, and the folio you took from the Fane estate." His eyes widened, then darted toward a suitcase on the bed. "You've got the wrong man." "Sure," I said. "And I'm the Pope. Mind if I come in before the lies pile too high?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The room was small, one bed, one lamp, and the faint odor of ink and mildew. The suitcase was half open, and even from the door I saw what looked like aged parchment wrapped in linen. "So," I said casually, "that wouldn't happen to be 17th century poetry, would it?" He swallowed. "I didn't steal anything. I rescued it. Miss Fane was going to sell the manuscripts to pay taxes. They'd have been broken up and lost." "Touching," I said. "And Dr. Brodie? Did you rescue him too?" His hands shook. "I didn't kill him. I swear it. I only went to see him that night, to warn him." "Warn him about what?" "About them," he whispered. "The people who wanted that manuscript gone. Define them." He rubbed his face, pacing. "Professor Hume for one. And others. Brodie's discovery threatened everything, reputations, grants, endowments. He thought Hume might sabotage him, so he asked me to keep a copy safe." "Copy?" "Yes. I photographed every page. That's what's in the suitcase, not the original. Brodie had it in his study that night." "Then who took the real one?" He looked at me miserably. "I don't know. When I left, he was alive. I gave him the photographs, told him to hide the original somewhere no one would think to look. The next morning, he was dead. I studied him. He was nervous, but his fear seemed real. If you didn't take the original, someone else did. And whoever that was, they pushed him out that window." He nodded slowly. "Maybe. But you don't understand, the manuscript's dangerous. It proves Milton borrowed from Eleanor Fane's writings, even used her drafts. If that came out, whole libraries would need rewriting. People would kill to stop that." I believed him, partly. But belief doesn't solve cases. I called Wolfe from the hallway phone. He listened without interruption, then said, "Bring him to New York." "And the photographs?" "Hale's terrified." "Good. Fear is persuasive. Return at once." By nightfall, we were back in the brownstone. Wolfe greeted us with his usual lack of enthusiasm, as though I'd brought home a stray dog that might shed on his rugs. He motioned for Hale to sit. "You claim," Wolfe began, "that you safeguarded a copy of the manuscript. Show me." Hale hesitated, then opened the suitcase. Inside were several large envelopes. Wolfe selected one carefully and drew out a black and white photograph. It showed a page of delicate handwriting, old, graceful, undeniably feminine. "Eleanor Fane's hand," Hale said. "Compare it to the Milton drafts, identical lines, reversed phrasing, same ink composition. Wolfe examined the photo closely, his eyes narrowing. Remarkable. If authentic, this would indeed rewrite literary history. Dr. Brodie said the same thing, Hale whispered. Then he was dead. Did you speak with anyone after his death? Wolfe asked. No. But someone followed me. A man in a dark coat. English accent. I saw him at the train station in New Haven. I looked at Wolfe. Sounds like our friend Professor Hume took a field trip. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or perhaps someone wishes us to think so. Mr. Hale, where is the original manuscript now? I told you, I don't know. Dr. Brodie hid it before he died. Wolfe tapped the photograph with one thick finger. Then we must discover where he would have hidden something of supreme value. Think. Did he mention any unusual place, any phrase that seemed significant? Hale frowned. He did say something odd that night. Paradise lies beneath the dust. I thought it was poetry. Wolfe's eyes brightened. Poetry, yes, but literal, too. Archie, you recall the dust pattern you observed on the Fane desk? Sure do. It was thicker than expected, except for one clear rectangle, Wolfe said. Meaning the folio had been moved recently. If Brodie borrowed that habit, he might have concealed his own folio beneath dust, inside a false bottom or behind books left to gather it. In his study? I asked. Precisely. The police overlooked it, and his killer assumed the manuscript was gone. That is why they silenced him, out of fear he still had proof. Hale's face went pale. Then the real manuscript might still be in that house? Very possibly, Wolfe said. Archie, tomorrow you'll return to Brodie's brownstone. Tell the landlord you're there on behalf of the estate. Search the study. Look for dust, or the lack of it. Fine, I said. And what about Hale? He stays here, Wolfe said firmly. He may prove useful, or bait. That last word hung in the air like gunpowder. Hale didn't like it, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to test Wolfe's calm authority. Later, after Hale was shown to a guest room, I found Wolfe staring at the photograph again. You think Hume did it? I asked. Wolfe shook his head. Hume may have the intellect for murder but not the nerve. No, someone else moved between them, someone practical enough to steal, brutal enough to kill, and clever enough to vanish. Someone like Hale? Perhaps, he murmured. Or someone who believes Hale has what they lost. I frowned. You mean whoever killed Brodie might come after him next? Wolfe gave a small, grim smile. Yes, Archie. Which is precisely why he's sleeping under my roof tonight. Chapter 6, The Search for the Hidden Folio. The next morning I woke to the smell of Wolfe's breakfast drifting from the kitchen, eggs, baked apples, and bacon sizzling like a promise. The man could despise movement, but he'd fight a war for breakfast. I grabbed toast and coffee and started planning the day's job, combing through a dead man's study for a manuscript that might rewrite history. When I left the brownstone, Wolfe was already issuing instructions from his chair. Archie, he said, you will be thorough but inconspicuous. Brodie's housekeeper is named Mrs. Finley. She remains in residence and will likely mistake you for a government auditor if you dress too neatly. Avoid that. Dust speaks only to those who let it. Got it, I said. And if the killer shows up while I'm chatting with the dust? Then use your natural wit. It's the only weapon I permit you. The ride to Brodie's brownstone took half an hour. It sat wedged between two newer apartment buildings on East 74th, an aging scholar's fortress surrounded by glass. A pale, wiry woman answered my knock, Mrs. Finley, judging by her weary eyes and the faint aroma of furniture polish that clung to her. I told the police everything, she said. I've got nothing new. Lucky for both of us, I said. I'm here to collect some papers for the estate, Dr. Brody's unfinished work. Mr. Ames sent me. She blinked, hesitated, then nodded. You can look, but don't move the furniture. I still clean here every Thursday. The study looked the same as in the photos I'd seen, tall shelves, a heavy oak desk near the window, a ladder for the upper books, and sunlight slanting across dust like a film reel from another century. The air still carried the faint scent of old tobacco and ink. I started with the desk. The drawers were mostly full of correspondence, letters from universities, half-finished notes on the Milton project, and a few bills. No sign of the manuscript or any false bottom. I remembered what Wolfe had said, paradise lies beneath the dust. I stepped back, studying the room. The dust patterns told a story if you knew how to read them. Most of the shelves had an even coating, except for one section along the lower right wall, 3 volumes slightly displaced, cleaner around their spines than the rest. I pulled them out, volumes on 17th century verse, all dull enough to cure insomnia. Behind them, the back panel looked slightly warped. I pressed on it, and it gave way with a faint creak. Inside the cavity lay a wrapped bundle, aged linen bound by red thread. My pulse kicked up. I unwrapped it carefully, and there it was, a folio of brittle pages, each covered in elegant, slanted handwriting. The ink had faded to brown, but the lines were unmistakably from Paradise Lost. Except they weren't exactly Milton's words, they were different, rougher, more human. The signature at the bottom of one page read E. Fane. Well, I'll be damned, I murmured. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned fast. Mrs. Finley stood in the doorway, her face pale. What is that? She demanded. Dr. Brody's missing manuscript, I said. You wouldn't happen to know how long it's been hiding here. Her hands clenched around her apron. That thing's cursed. I told him to burn it. He said it was worth more than his life. Looks like he was right. Did you tell anyone about it after his death? Her eyes shifted away. A man came asking questions. Said he was from the university. English accent. He looked through that desk for an hour before the police came back. Let me guess, Professor Hume? She nodded nervously. That's the name he gave. But after he left, I found the desk key on the floor. It wasn't his place to have it. I pocketed the folio, rewrapped it carefully, and thanked her. If anyone else asks about this house, I said, you haven't seen me. And you haven't seen this manuscript. Back on the street, the sky had gone darker, wind pushing at the edges of my coat. I caught a cab, half expecting to spot a tail. None appeared, but my nerves stayed alert all the way back to West 35th. Wolfe was in the office when I arrived, reading the morning paper with the contentment of a cat in a sunbeam. I laid the wrapped folio on his desk. Found it, I said. Hidden behind some books. Looks like Brody took his own advice, paradise beneath the dust. His eyebrows lifted, but otherwise he didn't move. Intact? Every page. He unwrapped it slowly, as if handling holy relics. For several minutes, silence filled the room except for the rustle of parchment. Then Wolfe said quietly, "This is genuine. The handwriting matches Fane's letters. Extraordinary. Good. Now all we need is the part where you tell me who killed Brody." He closed the folio. "Soon. But first, we must see who comes for it." "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said, "we will make it known, subtly, that the manuscript has been recovered. Whoever took Brody's life will not rest until it's in their possession again. And when they come, Archie, we shall be waiting." I frowned. "You're setting bait." "Yes. And our guest, Mr. Hale, will play the role of fisherman." As if on cue, Hale appeared at the office door, looking as pale as the parchment Wolfe had just examined. "You found it," he breathed. "Thank God. Now can I leave?" "Not yet," Wolfe said. Your usefulness has not expired. Tonight, you will make a call to Professor Hume. Tell him the manuscript has surfaced. Invite him here under the pretense of retrieving it before the police learn. Hale looked ready to faint. He'll kill me. Wolfe poured himself a beer. Possibly. But not before revealing what I need to know. Archie will ensure your continued respiration. I said, "Gee, thanks for the promotion." Wolfe ignored me, turning back to the folio. This, he murmured, is more than a curiosity of letters. It is the motive for murder. And murder, as ever, is merely the simplest confession of fear. That night, Hale made the call while I listened from across the room. He spoke nervously, saying he'd recovered the missing folio and needed to return it quietly. There was a long pause on the other end, and then Hale said, "Tonight?" "Yes. I can be there in an hour." When he hung up, his face had drained of color. "He's coming." "Good," Wolfe said, leaning back. "Then perhaps we'll learn whether Professor Hume kills to preserve poetry, or to protect himself." The clock ticked toward midnight as we waited, the folio lying on Wolfe's desk under a single lamp. Outside, rain started to fall again, soft and steady. Somewhere in that sound was a warning, but we were past listening. Whoever came through that door next wouldn't be looking for truth. They'd be looking for silence. And Wolfe, bless him, was ready to greet them. Chapter 7, The Midnight Visitor. The city outside had gone quiet except for the rain whispering against the windows. Wolfe hated late-night company, but tonight he'd made an exception. The brownstone was dim, the office lamp throwing a warm circle across the desk where the faint folio rested like a sleeping secret. Hale sat on the couch near the door, pale and fidgeting. I stood by the bookshelf, revolver holstered but ready. Wolfe, unhurried as always, leaned back in his chair with a calm that only comes from knowing you've already set the board before your opponent arrives. At 11:58, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Professor Roland Hume stood on the stoop, rain clinging to his coat and hat. His face was sharper now, eyes bright with purpose, or desperation. "Good evening, Mr. Goodwin," he said, voice clipped. Mr. Hale insisted this was urgent. "Urgent's one word for it," I said, stepping aside. "Mr. Wolfe is expecting you." He entered with the slow, wary grace of a man walking into a lion's den. The moment he saw the folio on Wolfe's desk, his expression changed. It wasn't surprise, it was hunger. "So it's true," he murmured. "You have it." "Indeed," Wolfe said evenly. "The famous Eleanor Fane folio. Or infamous, depending on your perspective. Beer?" Hume shook his head. "I'm not here for conversation. That manuscript belongs to the Fane estate. You have no right to it." "I have every right to what was entrusted to me by those seeking justice," Wolfe replied. "Including Mr. Hale, who has been most cooperative." At the mention of his name, Hale stiffened. Hume's eyes flicked toward him with cold fury. "You traitorous fool. You were supposed to safeguard it, not hand it to charlatans." "I didn't," Hale began, but Wolfe raised a finger. "Please, Professor. Let's preserve civility. Dr. Brody's death was not an accident, and you, I believe, know why." Hume's nostrils flared. "I know it was a tragedy caused by madness. Brody was unraveling. He saw ghosts in ink. He believed this woman, this minor poet, wrote Milton's masterpiece. It was blasphemy against scholarship. Blasphemy worth killing for?" I asked. He turned to me sharply. "Are you accusing me?" "Not yet," I said. "But you were in New Haven, asking questions. You had the key to his desk." His jaw tightened. "I received that key by post, anonymously. I used it to retrieve his drafts, not to kill him. I wanted proof of his deceit." Wolfe's eyes half closed. You admit, then, that you broke into his study? I visited him, yes, Hume snapped. We argued. He was drunk, raving that he'd prove me wrong in front of the entire academic board. I left him alive. The next day, he was dead. And the folio? Wolfe asked. I never saw it again. I assumed he destroyed it out of shame. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. Then allow me to illuminate your assumption. He opened the folio, revealing the faded pages. The candlelight caught the ink, turning it gold at the edges. Hume stared, transfixed. Good God, it exists. Indeed, Wolfe said softly. And it bears Eleanor Fane's hand. You can see her annotations, identical phrasing to Milton's. This is no forgery, Professor. For a moment, Hume's arrogance cracked. His eyes filled with a mix of awe and dread. If this is genuine, he whispered, then everything I've defended, my entire life's work, would crumble. Wolfe finished. And yet, you did not kill him, did you? No, Hume said fiercely. I despised his theories, but murder? Never. Then who did? I asked. Before Hume could answer, Hale made a small sound, half gasp, half cry. He was staring at the doorway. I turned. A woman stood there, soaked from the rain, her hair clinging to her face. Eleanor Fane, the modern one, the descendant, had arrived uninvited. I see I'm late, she said quietly. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Quite the dramatic entrance, Miss Fane. She ignored him, eyes fixed on the manuscript. So it's true. You found it. I did, Wolfe said. Though your caretaker omitted certain details. Such as your involvement. Her expression didn't flicker. I was never involved. Then why, Wolfe said, did you visit Dr. Brody's house the night he died? That stopped her cold. Hume looked startled, Hale sank lower in his chair. You followed him from the estate, Wolfe went on. You feared he'd expose your ancestor as Milton's uncredited author. The scandal would have destroyed your family's reputation, and your finances with it. That's absurd, she said, voice trembling. I only wanted to warn him. Warn him? Wolfe repeated. You confronted him in his study. He refused to destroy the manuscript. You struggled. He fell. Rain beat harder against the windows. She took a shaky breath. I didn't mean to. He lunged toward the desk. I tried to stop him. I thought he'd only lose his balance for a second, then he was gone. Hume's face twisted in shock. You, good God, woman, you murdered him over reputation? Her eyes flashed. Reputation? You men talk of truth, but none of you care for it. My ancestor was mocked, dismissed, erased. If Brody had published his discovery, it would have ruined her legacy again, turned her into a scandal, not a pioneer. Wolfe's tone was calm, almost sympathetic. So you took the manuscript to protect her name. I hid it behind the shelves, she said quietly. I thought it was over. Until Hale told me he'd taken photographs. Hale's voice broke. You came to my room in New Haven that night, you threatened me. I just wanted the copies destroyed, she said, tears starting to fall. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Wolfe exhaled slowly, folding his hands. Yet 2 men nearly died for one woman's truth. The irony is exquisite. The room went silent except for the rain. Then I stepped forward. Miss Fane, I'm afraid you'll have to come with me. The police will want your statement. She didn't resist. Her face had gone pale, but there was a strange calm in her eyes, as if confessing had finally set her free. Hume stood frozen, staring at the folio. So she killed him to preserve what he meant to reveal, he murmured. The irony indeed. Spare me your philosophy, Wolfe said. Truth survives lies the way stone survives weather, it simply takes longer. I led Miss Fane out, turning her over to the officer Wolfe had summoned earlier, one of his quiet arrangements. When I came back, Hume was gone, and Wolfe sat with his eyes closed, the folio before him. He said softly, "Milton wrote of Paradise Lost. But tonight, Archie, we saw one almost found, only for pride to bury it again." I couldn't argue with that. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. Another murder solved, another tragedy inked into human vanity. Wolfe reached for his beer, sipped once, and muttered, "You see, Archie, people never kill for the truth. Only for the version of it they can live with." Chapter 8, The Final Revelation. The morning after Eleanor Fane's confession dawned bright, as if the city itself had decided to wash off the night's sins. The rain was gone, leaving the streets shining like mirrors. In the brownstone, the air carried the scent of Wolfe's orchids and freshly brewed coffee. Hale had left under police escort, Hume had vanished back to England with his reputation bruised but intact, and the manuscript, the real, irreplaceable Eleanor Fane folio, rested in Wolfe's safe. I was at my desk typing up notes when Wolfe emerged from the plant rooms, still wearing his yellow suspenders and an expression that meant he was about to philosophize before lunch. He lowered himself into his chair with a grunt. "Archie, I find humanity's relationship with the written word curious. Men worship ink as though it were blood. In this case, it nearly was. Considering one dead historian and two near-fainting scholars, I'd say it was close enough," I said. "The cops are done questioning Miss Fane. They're thinking involuntary manslaughter. She'll serve time but not much." "Justice," Wolfe murmured, "is rarely neat. Still, her motive was less greed than misguided preservation. Yeah, she wanted to protect her ancestors' name by hiding the only proof that could have vindicated her," I said. "That's irony with a capital I." He gave a faint smile. "Precisely. In her attempt to defend Eleanor Fane's reputation, she ensured her obscurity would endure." I leaned back. "So what happens to the folio now? Ames wants it for the magazine, the police want it for evidence, and Hume probably wants it buried at sea. The folio," Wolfe said, "shall be photographed, catalogued, and returned to Miss Fane's estate under court supervision. Ames will receive the right to publish an account of the discovery, under my editorial guidance." I whistled. "Editorial guidance? You planning to moonlight as a literary critic?" He glared. "I intend to prevent further stupidity. The public will not be subjected to another battle of egos disguised as scholarship." I grinned. "You just can't resist control, can you?" Wolfe ignored that. He was staring at the manuscript as if it might start reciting poetry. "The tragedy of Brodie's death," he said finally, "was not ambition, but timing. Had he published quietly, Miss Fane might never have known until it was too late to stop him. But he announced his discovery, invited envy, and drew his own noose. Seems to me he died chasing the truth," I said. "No, Archie. He died chasing recognition. Truth is rarely enough to kill for, but pride is." There was a knock at the door before I could answer. I opened it to find Clifford Ames, the publisher, holding his hat in both hands like a man visiting confession. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "I came as soon as I heard. They said you recovered the manuscript." "We did," Wolfe said. "And you will be pleased to know your magazine's name will not appear in any scandal sheets. The matter is concluded." Ames stepped closer, gaze falling on the safe. "Then it's true, Eleanor Fane wrote portions of Paradise Lost?" "True," Wolfe said, "that she influenced Milton. Whether she wrote entire passages remains uncertain. Brodie's analysis was incomplete. But his evidence is undeniable enough to provoke generations of argument. You may wish to prepare your printing presses." Ames sighed, half in relief, half in resignation. "History rewritten. And at what cost? Wolfe nodded toward him. A single life, Mr. Ames. The usual price for enlightenment. Ames left soon after, leaving the room quiet again except for the faint hum of the city outside. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. "You know," I said, "there's something that still bugs me. Hale said he took the photos to protect the truth. But that's the same line Brody used before he got himself killed. I keep wondering, why do people think truth needs protecting instead of sharing?" Wolfe smiled faintly. "Because, Archie, once shared, it belongs to everyone. And human beings are very poor at sharing." He gestured toward the safe. "That folio will outlast us all. Scholars will quarrel over it for a century, and still, no one will agree on who wrote Paradise Lost. Such is the persistence of vanity." I poured myself a drink. "Well, at least the murderer's behind bars, and nobody else died for poetry. That's progress." "Progress," Wolfe repeated, tasting the word like something foreign. "A curious illusion. We uncover knowledge and call it forward motion, yet every truth is merely another reason for conflict. Tell me, Archie, has humanity improved since Milton's time?" "I wouldn't know," I said. "But the beer's colder, and the bullets are faster." That earned me the faintest chuckle, which from Wolfe was like applause. The afternoon wore on quietly. Saul Panzer dropped by later to deliver his final report. Hale was cleared of all charges, Hume had boarded a ship back to London, and the police had officially closed the case. Miss Fane, according to Saul, had confessed again in private, claiming she never intended to kill Brody, only to destroy the manuscript once and for all. When Saul left, Wolfe reached for another beer. "Archie," he said, "if ever you feel compelled to write a book, let it be about orchids. People will call it dull, but at least no one will die for it." "Too late," I said. "If I ever write a book, it'll be titled The Fat Man Solves Murder by Sitting Still." He raised his glass with mock solemnity. "A bestseller, no doubt." We sat there for a while, the brownstone warm and still. The rain had started again, faint and steady. Wolfe glanced toward the window, then back to the safe where the folio lay hidden. "It's an odd world, Archie," he said finally. "A poet hides her work out of modesty, a scholar dies proving it existed, and a descendant kills to erase it again. Each in pursuit of honor, and each undone by it. Maybe that's what they call poetic justice," I said. He looked almost pleased. "Poetic, perhaps. Justice, no. But sufficient for our needs." I typed up the final report that night. Another case closed, another tragedy folded into history's quiet pages. Somewhere, a printer's press would soon hum to life, and Brody's name would be remembered not as a madman, but as the man who nearly gave a forgotten woman her due. As I shut off the lamp, Wolfe spoke softly from his chair. "Archie." "Yeah?" "When truth sleeps too long, it always wakes in blood." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Outside, the rain had stopped again, and the city was holding its breath.